Talking about here on my channel right now. It's all about Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively's.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. It's Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2026, and as the day winds down and people begin their evening commutes, there is a major development unfolding in one of the most talked about legal disputes currently dominating headlines. Today's update comes from the ongoing legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, a case that has steadily transformed from a private dispute into a widely discussed Hollywood controversy followed closely by media outlets, legal analysts, and the public alike. On today's episode of Coravanta, Lars Harry begins by addressing the breaking news that arrived late in the day, the kind of unexpected court decision that tends to reshape the narrative of an already heated case. A federal judge has officially denied Blake Lively's request to impose sanctions against Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman. At first glance, the ruling might appear to be just one procedural decision among many within a complicated legal fight, but for those closely following the case, the meaning behind the ruling carries much greater weight. It represents a clear victory for Baldoni's legal team and a setback for Lively, especially in the ongoing struggle over public perception surrounding the lawsuit. To understand why this moment matters, it is important to step back and look at what Blake Lively's legal team had actually requested. In the filing submitted to the court, Lively's attorneys argued that Brian Friedman had made public statements outside the courtroom that attacked her character and credibility in ways they believed could influence the fairness of the upcoming trial. Their argument relied on legal standards governing what attorneys are allowed to say publicly about ongoing cases. Specifically, they pointed to rules of professional conduct that restrict lawyers from making statements that could materially prejudice judicial proceedings. In simple terms, Lively's lawyers claimed that Friedman had crossed the line by speaking too freely to the media and shaping public opinion against their client. Because of that, they asked the judge to impose sanctions against him, essentially a punishment meant to discourage what they described as inappropriate behavior. However, when the court reviewed the request, the judge reached a different conclusion. The ruling, delivered by United States District Judge Louis Lyman, explained that the plaintiff, Blake Lively, had not demonstrated that Friedman's comments were likely to significantly influence the outcome of the case. Even if those statements were considered aggressive or critical, the judge stated that they were made months before the scheduled trial date and therefore did not meet the legal standard required to justify sanctions. In legal language, the order concluded that the motion lacked sufficient grounds. The result was simple and definitive: the request for sanctions was denied. While this might sound like a technical ruling, the reaction from observers has been immediate. For Baldoni's team, the decision reinforces their argument that they have the right to defend their client publicly while also preparing their case in court. For Lively's camp, the denial is not only a procedural loss but also a symbolic one, because it suggests the judge was unconvinced by their claims of misconduct. In the broader context of the lawsuit, the ruling adds another chapter to a case that has already been filled with dramatic claims, counterclaims, and constant media attention. The controversy that sparked the sanctions request traces back to comments Brian Friedman made during an interview discussing the possibility that Blake Lively might testify during the trial. At the time, reports indicated that Lively's legal team planned for her to take the witness stand if the case moved forward to a full jury trial. Responding to that news, Friedman delivered a remark that quickly spread across entertainment news outlets and social media. He suggested that if Lively truly wanted her testimony to be heard publicly, it might as well be broadcast live from Madison Square Garden, with the proceeds going to support survivors of domestic violence. The comment was widely interpreted as sarcasm, but it also served as a pointed challenge to Lively's narrative. Within Lively's camp, the remark was received very differently. Sources close to her described the statement as inappropriate, arguing that the case involved serious allegations and should not be turned into what they saw as a publicity spectacle. To them, the Madison Square Garden comment trivialized the matter and attempted to undermine the credibility of the claims being brought forward. That interpretation ultimately became part of the argument for sanctions from Baldoni's perspective. However, the statement was simply part of a broader strategy to confront the accusations head-on. His legal team has repeatedly signaled that they intend to challenge Lively's version of events aggressively, both in the courtroom and in the public conversation surrounding the case. In their view, transparency benefits their client. If the case truly reaches trial, they believe the evidence and testimony should be examined openly, allowing the public to judge for themselves. This dynamic reflects a larger reality of modern high-profile lawsuits. Legal battles involving celebrities rarely unfold quietly. Instead, they often develop in two parallel arenas, the courtroom itself and the court of public opinion. In many cases, reputations, careers, and future opportunities are influenced as much by public perception as by legal verdicts. For someone like Justin Baldoni, who works within the entertainment industry, the stakes extend beyond the legal outcome. Even if a person ultimately prevails in court, the damage caused by controversy can affect their professional future for years. The entertainment industry, after all, is known for its risk-averse culture. Producers, studios, and investors frequently prefer to avoid hiring individuals associated with major scandals or unresolved legal disputes. From a purely business perspective, choosing someone without controversy is often considered the safer option. That reality is one reason why public narratives surrounding celebrity lawsuits become so intense. Each side wants to shape how the story is perceived, knowing that perception may influence opportunities long after the legal case concludes. Examples from the past illustrate this pattern clearly. Actors and public figures involved in high-profile disputes often struggle to regain their previous standing, even when courts rule in their favor. Legal victories do not always translate into immediate career recovery. The entertainment industry's cautious nature means that decision-makers sometimes hesitate to work with individuals whose names remain linked to controversy. For Blake Lively, the situation presents its own challenges. While she remains a recognizable figure with an established career, the lawsuit has inevitably placed her under a microscope. Media coverage has examined every detail of the case, from legal filings to public statements and rumors circulating online. As the case progresses, every ruling, no matter how small, becomes another data point shaping the broader narrative. That is why today's decision carries weight beyond the specific issue of sanctions. It signals how the court is approaching the dispute and provides insight into how certain arguments are being evaluated. Although the denial does not determine the ultimate outcome of the case, it gives Baldoni's team momentum as the legal process continues. At the same time, Lively's side has been working to maintain its own narrative through strategic communication. Not long after the sanctions ruling became public, reports began circulating through entertainment media highlighting another development: Lively's continued push for a jury trial. According to coverage appearing in major publications, her legal team referenced a recent federal appeals court decision that they believe supports their argument against dismissing the case entirely. By pointing to that ruling, they hope to strengthen their position that the dispute deserves to be heard before a jury rather than resolved through early dismissal. This back and forth reflects the complicated chess match typical of high-stakes litigation. Each motion, each ruling, and each public statement becomes part of a larger strategy designed to influence how the case unfolds. Lawyers are not only presenting arguments to a judge, they are also anticipating the possibility of appeals, preparing for trial scenarios, and managing public perception simultaneously. For observers trying to understand where the case might be heading, several possible outcomes remain on the table. One scenario involves the court dismissing certain claims before trial, which could significantly narrow the scope of the dispute. Another possibility is that the case proceeds to a full trial, where witnesses, including potentially Blake Lively herself, would testify under oath and evidence would be examined in detail before a jury. Each path carries different implications for both parties. If the case were to reach trial and one side achieved a clear legal victory, that outcome could reshape the public narrative surrounding the dispute. However, trials also carry risks. Testimony, cross-examinations, and newly introduced evidence can introduce unpredictable elements that neither side can fully control. For this reason, many high-profile cases eventually conclude through settlements or negotiated agreements before reaching the courtroom. Yet at this stage, neither side appears ready to step back. The legal filings suggest a determination to continue fighting, with each development fueling further debate among commentators and followers of the case. Social media discussions, legal analyses, and entertainment news segments have all contributed to turning the dispute into a constant topic of conversation. The denial of sanctions therefore represents more than just a line in a legal document. It illustrates how the early stages of the case are unfolding and how the judge is interpreting the arguments presented so far. While the ruling may not end the controversy, it marks another moment where the balance of momentum briefly shifts. As Lars Harry explains on Coravanta, moments like this demonstrate why observers need to pay attention to procedural decisions that might otherwise seem minor. In complex lawsuits, smaller rulings often reveal the court's perspective on the strategies employed by each side. When a motion is denied outright, it can indicate that the judge sees little merit in the claim being presented, at least under the standards required by law. For Baldoni supporters, the decision reinforces the belief that his legal team is successfully pushing back against what they view as exaggerated accusations. For Lively supporters, the setback is unlikely to end their confidence in her claims, but it does highlight the challenges her attorneys may face moving forward, and with that, the story continues to evolve. Legal battles rarely progress in straight lines, they move through phases of victories, setbacks, and unexpected twists. The events of this Friday the 13th have simply added another chapter to a saga that has already captured significant public attention. As the evening unfolds, more filings or statements could emerge, potentially changing the tone of the discussion once again. But for now, one fact remains clear: the judge's decision to deny Blake Lively's sanctions request has delivered an early courtroom win to Justin Baldoni's legal team, ensuring that the broader legal confrontation between the two sides is far from over. The Coravanta coverage continues to monitor every development closely, and as Lars Harry often reminds viewers, cases like this are not decided by headlines alone. They unfold step by step, motion by motion, ruling by ruling. And today's ruling, even if it does not determine the final outcome, has undeniably shifted the momentum of the moment. As the story continued to unfold, the denial of Blake Lively's sanctions request quickly became the central topic dominating discussion surrounding the case. For many legal observers, the ruling was not necessarily the most dramatic moment in the overall lawsuit, but it carried symbolic importance. Courtroom battles often revolve around strategy, momentum, and credibility. When a judge dismisses a motion in such clear terms, it sends a message about how that particular argument was received. In this instance, the court essentially stated that Blake Lively's team had not demonstrated that the public comments made by Justin Baldoni's attorney were likely to influence the fairness of the trial. In other words, the judge was not convinced that the remarks created the kind of legal harm required to justify disciplinary action. For Baldoni's legal team, that decision represented a small but meaningful victory. It allowed them to continue operating under the same strategy they had adopted from the beginning, being vocal, direct, and unapologetic in defending their client. Brian Friedman, Baldoni's attorney, has developed a reputation for precisely that style. He is not known for quietly handling disputes behind closed doors. Instead, he often engages with the public conversation around high-profile cases, understanding that modern legal battles, particularly those involving celebrities, unfold in both legal and cultural arenas. This approach reflects a deeper reality about the entertainment industry. When public figures become entangled in legal disputes, the outcome inside the courtroom is only one part of the equation. The other part involves reputation, perception, and future opportunities. In Hollywood, image is often inseparable from career prospects. Producers, studios, investors, and collaborators frequently evaluate potential risks before attaching themselves to a project. If a person is associated with an ongoing controversy, that connection alone can make decision-makers hesitant. For Justin Baldoni, the stakes of this case extend beyond legal liability. Even if the lawsuit ultimately ends in his favor, the publicity surrounding it could still influence how the industry views him. History offers many examples of individuals who technically won their legal battles but found their careers permanently altered afterward. Once a name becomes linked with scandal, some doors quietly close, regardless of what a court ruling might say. That reality explains why Baldoni's legal team appears determined to challenge the narrative surrounding the case as aggressively as possible. From their perspective, silence would allow speculation to fill the void. By speaking publicly and presenting their interpretation of events, they attempt to counterbalance accusations and ensure that their client's side of the story remains visible. Blake Lively's camp, on the other hand, has taken a different approach. Rather than responding to every public statement, her team has often communicated through formal legal filings and carefully timed media coverage. Shortly after the sanctions ruling, attention shifted toward another piece of news appearing in entertainment outlets. Reports began highlighting Lively's defense of her request for a jury trial as the case moves closer to its expected timeline. According to those reports, Lively's attorneys referenced a recent federal appeals court decision they believe supports their argument against dismissing her claims. By pointing to that precedent, they are attempting to strengthen the position that the dispute deserves to be heard by a jury rather than resolved through pre-trial rulings. In many civil cases, defendants seek to have claims dismissed before trial, arguing that the allegations lack sufficient legal merit. Plaintiffs, meanwhile, often push for the opportunity to present their evidence before jurors, believing that a full trial offers the best chance to persuade the court of public opinion as well as the legal system. The timing of this new media coverage was notable. Observers who closely follow high-profile litigation frequently point out how information can surface in the press almost simultaneously with developments in court filings. It creates the impression that each side is communicating not only with the judge but also with the public audience watching the case unfold. Articles appear, statements circulate, and narratives form, all while the legal process continues behind the scenes. In the case of Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, this dynamic has been particularly visible. Every motion, every ruling, and every rumor quickly becomes part of the larger conversation. Supporters of each side interpret the same events in dramatically different ways. Some see the denial of sanctions as evidence that Baldoni's legal team is gaining ground. Others argue that the decision addresses only a narrow issue and has little impact on the core allegations themselves. What makes situations like this fascinating is how both legal arguments and public storytelling evolve simultaneously. Lawyers must operate within the structured framework of court procedures, presenting evidence, citing precedents, and following strict rules of conduct. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, journalists, commentators, and social media users analyze the same developments through a completely different lens. The result is an ongoing interplay between legal strategy and public perception. Another factor shaping the trajectory of this case is the question of what each side ultimately hopes to achieve. In many lawsuits, the end goal is financial compensation or legal vindication. But in disputes involving public figures, reputation often becomes just as important. For someone with a career in entertainment, public trust and audience support can be as valuable as any courtroom verdict. That is why some analysts speculate about alternative scenarios that could emerge as the case progresses. One possibility involves certain claims being dismissed before trial. If that happens, the narrative surrounding the dismissal could vary depending on how it is presented. Supporters of Baldoni might describe it as proof that the accusations lacked legal substance. Supporters of Lively might frame it as an example of systemic barriers preventing certain claims from being heard fully. Another scenario would see the case move forward to a full trial, potentially including testimony from both parties. If Blake Lively were to take the witness stand, the moment would likely attract enormous media attention. Celebrity testimony in high-profile trials often becomes one of the most closely watched aspects of the proceedings. Every word spoken under oath can shape how jurors, reporters, and the public interpret the events being disputed. Trials also introduce a level of unpredictability that makes them risky for both sides. Evidence can emerge in ways that neither party fully anticipates. Witnesses may provide statements that alter the tone of the case. Jurors bring their own perspectives and interpretations to the evidence presented before them. For these reasons, many legal disputes settle before reaching the courtroom, even when both sides initially appear determined to fight to the end. At this stage, however, there is little indication that either Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni intends to retreat. The legal filings continue, the media coverage continues, and the debate surrounding the case remains intense. Friday's ruling denying sanctions is simply one moment in what could become a long and complicated process. During the same broadcast on Courtroom, Lars Harry also shifted the conversation to a completely different but equally serious topic unfolding on the global stage: the escalating conflict involving Iran. While the celebrity lawsuit dominates entertainment headlines, international developments carry consequences that reach far beyond Hollywood. According to emerging reports, the conflict has already produced significant casualties and raised concerns about the broader economic and geopolitical impact. One of the most troubling aspects of the situation involves the uncertainty surrounding casualty numbers. Government officials have provided limited information, leaving journalists and analysts struggling to determine the full scope of the damage. Reports mention injuries, return to duty cases, and ongoing military operations across several locations in the region. Yet precise figures regarding fatalities remain difficult to confirm for families with loved ones serving overseas. That uncertainty can be deeply unsettling. Communication disruptions and rapidly changing conditions make it difficult to obtain reliable updates. The absence of clear answers fuels frustration among citizens who want transparency about the risks facing their soldiers. Another major concern involves the strategic waterway known as the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical routes for global oil transportation. When tensions escalate in that region, the consequences ripple through international markets. Oil prices can rise sharply, affecting everything from transportation costs to consumer goods. If shipping traffic through the strait becomes restricted or dangerous, the economic impact could spread quickly across multiple countries. Energy markets react rapidly to uncertainty. Even rumors of potential disruptions can push prices upward, affecting industries that depend heavily on fuel. Trucking, aviation, shipping, and manufacturing all rely on stable energy supplies. When prices double or supply routes become unstable, the effects eventually reach everyday consumers through higher prices and economic slowdowns. The possibility of a prolonged conflict also raises strategic questions. Military experts often point out that wars involving large regional powers rarely conclude quickly. Geography, population size, and political alliances all influence how long a conflict might last and how difficult it becomes to achieve decisive outcomes. Countries fighting on their own territory often possess advantages that outside forces struggle to overcome. In discussions surrounding the Iran conflict, analysts frequently mention these complexities. Iran's population, terrain, and strategic position make it a formidable opponent. Even limited engagements can escalate into broader confrontations if additional nations become involved. As a result, governments must carefully weigh their actions, balancing immediate objectives against the risk of wider escalation. While Lars Harry emphasized the importance of staying informed about international developments, he also acknowledged that audiences often feel overwhelmed by the constant stream of news. Between celebrity controversies, political tensions, and global conflicts, the modern information landscape can feel relentless. Yet understanding these issues remains essential because the decisions made today can shape economic and political realities for years to come. Returning to the central theme of the broadcast, the day's events demonstrated how quickly narratives can shift. In the morning, speculation about potential sanctions against Baldoni's attorney dominated discussion. By afternoon, the judge's ruling had already changed the tone of the conversation. Such rapid developments illustrate why following legal cases in real time can be both fascinating and challenging. The Blake Lively vs. Justin Baldoni lawsuit continues to evolve, and each new filing or ruling adds another layer to an already complex story. For now, the denial of sanction stands as a momentary victory for Baldoni's legal team and a reminder that the path to a final resolution is rarely straightforward. As the case moves closer to future hearings and potential trial dates, both sides will continue presenting arguments, shaping narratives, and preparing for the possibility of a courtroom showdown. For viewers and readers following the saga, the most important thing to remember is that legal processes move step by step. A single ruling rarely decides everything. Instead, each decision builds upon the last, gradually constructing the framework within which the final outcome will emerge, and so the story remains far from finished. The legal filings will continue, the headlines will continue, and the debate surrounding the case will undoubtedly intensify as new developments appear. Whether the dispute ultimately ends in a trial, a settlement, or another unexpected turn, one thing is certain: the events of this Friday the 13th have ensured that the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni controversy will remain a major topic of conversation for the foreseeable future. As Coravanta signs off for the day, Lars Harry reminds viewers that updates could arrive at any moment. Legal battles, especially those involving public figures, rarely pause for long. When the next development surfaces, the conversation will begin again, with new questions, new reactions, and perhaps another twist in a story that continues to captivate audiences across the entertainment world and beyond.